Mama, where are these starting?
There's a good indication of people not really giving a damn. Good morning. Welcome to the Hobart Commuter. I want to start the day on that note. So, just a shortish vlog today. I wanted to talk about the Tasmanian state budget that was just released. There's a good example of why you should do up your wrist buttons on your shirt, because that ride can happen. That rides up your elbow. Very unprofessional. So, yeah, like part of the reason I started this blog was to talk about Hobart congestion getting quite bad, and that it might encourage more people to ride bikes. And I'd seen more bikes on the road beginning sort of late 2016 when congestion started to become a real problem. So the other thing too was the university moving in the city, and you're going to have more students wanting cheaper ways to commute. So basically the state budget came out, and obviously there's a lot of different components to a budget. It's a health budget. It was described in one news outlet as the health budget, and there's a huge emphasis on health. And I'll come back to that. But what I want to talk about for purposes of this blog is the infrastructure, so the money put forward to try and address the traffic congestion in Hobart. And this is not something that I'm making up either. They've just come out with the TomTom report. Now the TomTom, I guess the TomTom is that GPS thing, so it's recording data in people's cars to see how slow they're progressing through the city. And Hobart has come out number 3 in the most congested traffic places in Australia, behind Sydney and Melbourne. So for a smallish city, I think it's a smallish city, that's pretty bad to have the 3rd worst traffic congestion in Australia. So what that means is, well, part of the budget was put forth to try and reduce this traffic congestion, and they put $1.8 million to try and reduce this. There's 3 main areas that was listed as being addressed with this money. The first was traffic signal maintenance or updates. I don't really know what that means. I guess improving the traffic lights. A second separate component was looking at the traffic light timing. Now, obviously that's super important for the flow of traffic. So they're going to look at that. And the third component, which is just escaping me right now. Oh yeah, okay, it was, oh God, they're really coming quick around me today. It was, they're looking at a real-time system that will tell drivers where congestion is. So I assume it's some kind of app that you can put on your phone, and it will tell you where there's problem spots so that you can avoid them. So those are the 3 main things that are at least reported as being attributed to the 1.8 million. So where has this come from? Well, where I think it's come from is that the government employed a congestion task force or a congestion group to look at ways to reduce the congestion in Hobart. And their report is published online. It was called Traffic Congestion something 2016. And as well as talking about the problems, it also listed a series of recommendations. And I'm just going to have to work a bit hard here to stay with this traffic. So it was quite a serious report, I think, in the sense that it looked at not only short-term recommendations like, let's see if we can get this. Hello. So not only recommendations, short-term recommendations, but also medium-term as well. So that's like 5 to 10 years, and also, you know, beyond that. So looking at traffic infrastructure, for quite some time. I think we'll run the corridor here. Go with this. So you'd imagine there would be other things besides looking at cars in a report that projected beyond 10 years in the traffic infrastructure. They did talk about some things like they were looking at changing lane configurations. They're looking at a ferry across the Derwent, which is the river that runs next to Hobart. And they're also looking at light rail coming in from the northern suburbs. So a train, basically to bring people into the city. It's going to be a little bit contentious. Now I'm going to show you a really lovely, just pause for a minute and show you a really lovely street here in Hobart. One of my favourites. It's called Fitzroy Place. And there's a beautiful park at the end of it. Thanks, mate. So look at this street. Someone obviously had the foresight to plant these beautiful trees either side of it. Lovely wide street. Got some lovely old buildings too that you might be able to see on the left and on the right. Hathaway House. Just a beautiful kind of ambience to this street. Anyways, what made me slightly disappointed about that report was the fact that there were 14 mentions of pedestrian in the report. This is a 16-page report now. It's a reasonably dense document. And guess how many mentions there were of bicycling or bikes or cycling? Yeah, you guessed it. Absolutely none. So that's a little bit disappointing for a document that's looking so long term that you wouldn't be looking at the infrastructure to try and improve the infrastructure of bikes as a means of taking away traffic from work. That's how little interest they show in doing this, which is such a shame. I think such a terrible shame. Now, interestingly, you seen me? Yep. Let's get out here. Interestingly, they have put 5 million, maybe even 6 actually, between two projects to improve cycling tourism in Tasmania. Now, tourism is quite a big deal here in Tasmania. It's a massive industry for us. We're basically, in some senses, we're a great national park and we've got a wonderful tourism showcase. So that's understandable. They built a mountain bike park in a place called Derby, up in the north of the state, which has been phenomenally successful. It just hosted the Mountain Bike World Championships. So there can't be much argument funding world-class resources that draw tourists and boost the economy through that tourism money. And I know I said that this was a health budget, and I understand completely that hospitals do need, to fix emergency services and get more beds and that sort of thing. But it just would have been wonderful to see, some money put forward towards improving the bicycle infrastructure, because the easier you make cycling, the more you separate the infrastructure from the cars and you make people feel safer getting on a bike. That leads to a lot of what's called incidental exercise. And that's not exercise that you have to make time for. People have to go to work, let's say, in the city. They can get on their bike and they can ride and don't have to worry about parking. And it's a benefit for their health and long-term health, which means less people end up needing to use the health system. So I think it's just a little disappointing. Maybe they just didn't have the money for it. And I mean, the reality is too, most people do drive cars. Hobart's flush with cars, far more than bikes. No question about that. And ultimately the government has to, it has to represent its constituents and its voters, most of whom drive cars. But, you know what's been the worst about all of this? is, in order to know what I'm talking about when I rabbit on these vlogs, is I have to read news articles about like things like the Tasmanian budget and, you know, articles about cycling infrastructure or congestion. And the worst thing is I try and stop myself every time I try and stop myself, but I cannot resist reading the comments at the bottom of the online news articles. Big mistake, big mistake. You basically learn to realise, if you're too saturated with it, which I think I'm becoming, I need to just ease up a little bit, you realise that there's a lot of people out there that hate bikes, like they just hate cyclists, and that's not being using hyperbole. They really loathe cyclists, and I don't want to be exposed to that too much. I mean, in my subconscious or my unconscious, I know those people are out there. I've met them on the roads before, and I'm sure as hell I'm going to meet them again. But it just does not do my psyche any good when I'm riding to know there are people out there whose just blood boils when they see me on the road. So that's been really disappointing. Anyway, that's all I really wanted to talk about in the fascinating subject of the Tasmanian state budget. So thanks for joining me on the ride, and I will see you next time. Thank you.